Hello and welcome to Through Africa. It is me, your host, Mercy Bamigbola. Today we are joining you live from our studios here in Ankara, Turkey, to talk about the Sudan war and the impact it has had on the health of the people. Right after that, we'll move to Cameroon, where we'll talk about the absence and the return of the president, and then to Ghana, where we'll talk about preparations towards the general elections in December. So we'll start with the Sudan war and the humanitarian issues going on in the country currently. We'll speak with Iman Abdulatif, who is a doctor of veterinary medicine, who will be talking to us about the humanitarian issues and the possible solutions to this problem. Hello, Iman.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How about you?
I'm fine. Thanks you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks a lot.
So, the Sudan war started about a year ago, more than a year ago, actually. Can we talk about the humanitarian issues? What is the condition of the people currently?
Mhm. Yeah, unfortunately, the war has really affected the country in many aspects. Like, if I'm going to mention, I'm going to highlight few points. I'm going to start about the risk of famine. Firstly, like a series of recent nutrition surveys carried out by the nutrition cluster across all 18 states indicate an alarming deterioration in the nutrition situation, and this puts Sudan among the top 4 countries of the highest prevalence of global acute malnutrition, unfortunately. And we expected that this prevalence going to be worse in 2025 due to the ongoing conflict and the other problem that the country is going through right now, and also the displacement and the access constraint. And we will not forget the point of the disease outbreaks. If we're going to mention about this point, Sudan currently is grappling with multiple disease outbreaks, including cholera, malaria, dengue fever, measles, rubella, with estimated 3.4 million children under the age of 5 at high risk of epidemic disease. These numbers is according to the UNICEF, and which is really scary numbers. And we will also according to the Ministry of Health, there is about 17,000 cholera cases that with a high fatality rate, and which is which scares a lot. And also according to the WHO, they estimated that 70 to 80% of the health facilities in areas worst affected by conflicts such as Jazeera, Kordofan, Darfur, and Khartoum, which is the capital, and about 45% of health facilities in other parts in country are barely operational or even completely closed. And another fact that we cannot forget, according to the IOM, that about 8 million of the people are internally displaced within the country. Sudan is really going through a bad time these days.
All right. Um, yes, we know that the country is really going through a hard time. And then a major development is the flooding issue that has come up.
Yeah,
You mentioned diseases like cholera
yes.
and the likes. How has this been affecting, or how has this intensified the lack of healthcare in the country?
Yeah. I already mentioned about the disease and the flooding time. The most affected part in Sudan by the floods are the Red Sea, North Darfur, the northern states. The problem with this area is not just the disease outbreak. 45% of those people, they were already displaced before the onset of the rainy season. So those people have experienced two displacement. The first one with the onset of the conflicts, and the second one with the onset of the rainy season. So those people have went through a secondary displacement. The problem also coming with these things, not just the disease as I mentioned, those areas were already at risk of famine. So with the rainy season and with the loss of the crops. So this worsen the problem and make those people going through like a double problem, not just the famine, also the floods and the displacement, unfortunately.
So in cases like this, women and children are the most vulnerable. How are the women in Sudan standing up to harassments and molestations that come as a result of the war and the
Yeah,
displacement too?
yeah, unfortunately. The ongoing violence, particularly in Khartoum, Darfur, and Kordofan, and those places, um, has exaggerated the risk faced by women and girls, with rising reports of conflict related to sexual violence and abuse. Those reports, according to the UN organization, nearly about 5 million are internal displaced women and girls are particularly vulnerable, with many cases of abuse going unreported, unfortunately, due to the lack of adequate support and fear of stigma. Unfortunately, this thing going, and also those women, not just the sexual abuse, but also they suffering from finding like accessible way to clean and hygiene water because of the affordability, safety concern, and distance. At the same time, the breakdown of justice, healthcare, and system makes support even harder for survivors to access, unfortunately.
All right. Now, most of these children are also students.
Yeah.
What is the condition of the students, I mean, education in Sudan?
Yeah, unfortunately, also another crisis that Sudan is going through. According to the UN reports, about 90 million school-age children now lacking access to formal education, and over 90% of nearly 23,000 schools are closed or inaccessible. So the problem of these things like um, lack of education or district or lack of distributed education is not just deprive the children from the right to learn, but also expose them to immediate and long-term dangers such as displacement, as I mentioned before, child recruitment, child marriage, and sexual violence. Attacks on the school and their use as emergency shelter for displaced family further compromise the safety of children. Like collectively, the war has created a humanitarian catastrophe of epic proportion for children. Not just the education, but also putting them in danger for uh, in a high risk for disease. Like children were the first responder for those diseases. They were the first people who were affected by the disease, and they died early because of the cholera and other diseases.
Oh. So, the international organizations, how are they responding to this situation?
Yeah, like despite the access challenges and funding gaps, 153 UN humanitarian partners operating in Sudan, they reach about 8 million. They were targeting 40 million. They reached only 8 million. That was between January 2024 and end of July. According to the UN reports, this include about 6 million people who received food and livelihood assistance. 8 million people were reached with wash assistance. 2 million people were reached with health services, and about 500 were reached with nutrition assistance.
Oh, this is such a sad situation for the country. But
Yeah,
I would also
unfortunately.
like to ask, what do you think are the solutions to these problems?
Actually, it's really complicated situation. But if we spoke uh, those things is about like a chain, and this chain is connected with each other. And the main problem is the war. If we could stop the war, we could the other thing could be better than that. For what we can do now is the humanitarian organization can help people as much as possible with the nutrition supply and the wash supply, because the hygiene problem now is really creating a really challenging situation for the people. And if I can mention another point, just also about the problem in Sudan, it's affected every Sudanese person, not just in Sudan, even the people who are abroad, including me. Like, people will think, they will start to worry about their families there. What happened to them? Are they able to eat? Are they able to find water? Are they safe? And I'm sure, I'm not just talking about myself, every Sudanese person around the whole world is being affected due to this war, not just psychologically, but also economically.
All right, dear Iman, thank you very much for speaking with us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And we hope to see more of you on the channel. Now we move to Ghana, where we'll be talking about the Ghana elections, which are scheduled to take place in December of 2024. That is less than 2 months to the election. This election is set to elect the president and members of parliament. And with less than 2 months to go, candidates are actively campaigning for the political seats. To talk more on this, we'll be connecting with Isaac Kaledze, who is a journalist. He speaks to us about the preparations towards this election. Hello, Isaac.
Hello. Hi. Nice meeting you and joining your program.
Thank you very much. So the first question I would like to ask is the economic crisis currently in the country. How is it affecting the preparations towards the election?
Well, so in previous elections, when we had perhaps what you would say is quite a favorable economic situation, you would have seen campaigns on top notch, which means politicians spending so much. But of course, we know that we have an economic crisis. And so for the political parties themselves, who are the main people who really go about the campaigns, you could see a bit of a measured way of how they go about their campaigns. But again, they have actually found a way to raise money and to be able to go about with their campaigns. So for the political parties, they are trying to raise funds from other places, even from voters, to help them to push their campaigns. But they have adopted new campaign strategies, using more of social media, virtual opportunities. But again, they are still doing the traditional way of campaigning. They can tell you more about how much they are spending, but we know that they are spending a lot. And of course, I'm sure once the elections are over, we could get to see much of how much they've spent. So yes, the economic situation has had an impact on how campaigns are. And even for the ordinary citizens, they seem to be going about their duties, doing what they have to do, because they have to fend for themselves. You've not had a fever yet catching up like you have in previous elections. But of course, that is just about time. I'm sure that will get intensified in the coming days.
Okay. All right, then. Each political party is campaigning for seats in the parliament, the presidential election. How are the people then responding to this?
So, well, for Ghanaians, I'm sure a lot of Ghanaians have made up their minds in terms of who they want to vote for, whether the ruling party or the opposition, the largest opposition party. You will say that for those people who belong to these parties, they've made up their minds based on their economic situation or based on where they are affiliated to. But there are other people who are what we call floating voters, undecided, who I think that the political parties still are trying to catch up with them. And they are always looking at their policies and their messages. What you will say is that people have made up their minds. When you talk to people, they say they know where they are voting. There's not much to say about those who are undecided as to where they'll be voting, because they are still looking at the policies the parties are preaching about and their manifestos. And it's too early to see whether indeed, in fact, the election is very close. It will be close for many analysts. And so we will hope to see in the coming days, maybe just like 2 weeks to the elections, whether indeed floating voters or undecided voters have made up their minds. But in terms of those who affiliate themselves with these parties, they know where they are voting.
All right. With the major political parties, which are the NPP and the NDC, at the forefront of these campaigns, where does the minority party stand?
So we have some minority parties who election watchers are looking up to as whether they can decide the elections. We have, for example, one of the candidates of the parties who broke away from the ruling party, who is Alan Chamante, who has actually formed his party. And the expectation is that that party can do some kind of damage to the ruling party. But besides that, we've actually had a history where only the two leading parties have had the control of the elections. And so that is going to happen. The beauty is that in democracy, people must be allowed to contest. And so we have the minority parties. They will do so every election year. But of course, the attention will be on the two largest political parties. The smaller parties are still going about their campaigns, hoping that they can actually make some impact and preach their message and get Ghanaians to support them. But the fact is that the two leading parties in Ghana are the ones that control these elections in terms of who is likely to win or lose.
All right. So the NPP and the NDC being the major parties, they presented their distinct visions for the future. But both parties, they aim to almost address the same thing, which is the economic recovery, job creation, healthcare, and the likes. How are the youths, who are the majority, we would say, responding to these different parties' visions for them?
So both parties have been in power before. These same issues that you have spoken about have been there for years. And electorate, voters, young people know exactly the track record of these parties and whether indeed they have the capacity to resolve these issues. But of course, because they are prevailing issues, the parties obviously will talk about it and promise that they want to address them. The young people really are looking for new solutions. They talk about the current government having almost 8 years to solve the problems that they are promising about, but they've still not seen that those issues have been addressed. The previous government, that is the largest opposition party, the NDC, has also been in power before, and the same issues have been there. They've seen how they address them. They are now promising new ways of resolving those issues. So yes, you see people responding that, well, we think that the opposition is bringing about some solutions, but we just don't trust whether indeed they can execute as they are promising. But with the ruling party, they are wondering why couldn't they execute it now, but hope to execute it when they are retaining power again. So you will say that young people are taking these messages critically and asking questions. That is what they are really doing now. But again, they will decide as to who they want to vote for. And the key aspect will be that it will come to those who are undecided, who really don't belong to these two political parties.
Okay, thank you there, Isaac. Now, finally, how do you foresee the impact of the election results, specifically on the economy of Ghana?
So the fact is that Ghana is currently under an IMF policy, which means that there are some restrictions, there are some programs that Ghana is following to ensure that it gets its economy back on track. And so whichever party wins, there's much will not change about this program, because the program is for 3 years and is not yet going to end. And obviously what it means is that every party that will come into power, whether they're ruling or the opposition, will still have to stick to it. So you won't see much change. But what voters or Ghanaians are expecting will be which of them will have the political will to perhaps cut down much more on expenditure and try as much as they can to lessen the burden on Ghanaians. Because again, Ghanaians are paying more taxes and all that have raised living conditions for people. So they'll be expecting that. But you won't expect a dramatic change in economic fortunes once the elections are concluded and results are declared the next year or 2 years. We will have to wait to see, but it will take like 2 or 3 years for us to see what really the new party or government can do to dramatically change the fortunes of the economy.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Isaac, for granting us your time and your knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we move to Cameroon, where the president of Cameroon has returned to the country after a long while. The Cameroonian president, Paul Biya, landed on Monday at the capital of the country, Yaoundé, through the international airport after several weeks out of the country amid rumors of his health. According to CRTV, the state's broadcasters, supporters wearing outfits displaying his portrait chanted to the beat of a drum and lined the roads as his motorcade swiftly left the airport for the presidential palace. The West African nation's 91-year-old leader appeared on TV after the presidential plane landed, shaking hands with officials next to his wife, a jubilant crowd all around him. We hope to see the president coming back into power and making decisions, considering the fact that for a few weeks now, he has missed important meetings like the Hunger 79, which took place in September. With that, we have come to the end of today's program, today's live program, and I hope that you would join us in the coming ones. It is still me, your host, Mercy Bamigbola, and I hope to see you. Sending your messages through our WhatsApp number, which is on the screen, and we'd love to answer your questions and go through your suggestions. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and bye.